Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy these live streams, like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. Links in the description of the video. In addition to the bonus live streams, you get access to a Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share art talk, tips, feedback, share works in progress, and more. You also get access to a digital archive of my comic books so you can read them online. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to pick up physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. There you can pick up all of my books, physical copies or digital. All right. So, let's see. What do we have on the docket today? See, Byron's in the chat. Hey, Byron. How you doing? Omar's already in the chat. He got here a little bit early, was saying hi, coming in to hang out. So today, figure drawing. Let me bring down overhead camera. I was really debating today whether to do some figure drawing or continue doing some creature design work for the next comic. But I will tell you what swayed me to do figure drawing is the fact that I'm having trouble with figure drawing. The current class I'm taking with Carl Ganas, it's on costume and the draped figure. And I will tell you this past week, I just dropped a bunch of books on the floor. And I'm going to have to get those because I'm going to need them at the end of the stream. Let me see if I can do this without stabbing myself in the eye with the pencils I have attached to my desk. Success. I think I'm going to reward myself with some coffee. This is one of those days where I can physically feel how nothing is running smoothly. And everything is just precariously balanced. Anyway, this was one of those weeks where everything that I've been trying to draw has just been coming out wonky. And so I thought I probably should spend some time just working on figure drawing. And this is going to be a little bit tricky here because I've changed my setup for class slightly so that now I actually have I'm drawing from an easel instead of having my sitting in a chair with this sort of propped up. Now I've got an easel, and it's caused me I used to draw on the right and have reference on the left, which makes sense because I am right-handed. But now it's easier to do it this way where I'm usually the screen that I'm looking at for class is usually to that side, so it makes more sense to draw on this side. So it's a little bit more awkward for me, but this page has been what I've been working on, and on this side has been drawings from class that did not come out well. And I'm basically just looking at them, trying to figure out what's going on and what's wonky and why. Oh, something else. And this is for anybody that watches my streams in the future, anybody that watches, later on today or watches the replay, is if you know of any live streamers that can recommend a good camcorder for live streaming or a good video camera. I'm using a webcam right now, and I'm not happy with the quality of this camera image. So what I want is to actually get a camera that I can place above me and zoom and have it pointed down and have it be higher resolution than what I've got here. So if anybody can recommend any good, like I'm looking at the back of this camera and it says ultra high definition. I'm like, this doesn't feel ultra high def to me. So I don't know. But, actually, that's something I should probably check, is whether the problem is me or whether it's the streaming software, and the streaming software is limiting the resolution of the secondary camera. I will have to look into that. But enough about that. So let's talk about drawing problems, because if you're watching me draw, you're probably curious what I've got going on that is troubling me. Let's see here. Byron says, the common saying, when you have one of those weeks, it means you're on the verge of a breakthrough. I thought you were going to say it means Mercury is in retrograde. But hopefully I am on the verge of a breakthrough. So the thing that I've realized is, normally when I start a figure, I start with lightly placing a line, and I'll go maybe darker than I normally would so you can see it. Lightly placing a line that is going to be the height of that entire figure. It's almost like that's my frame for the figure. Then halfway up is where I place the beginning of the torso. So the legs are going to be below that. Then I try to block in the torso lightly. And then from there, it's block in the legs as a stick figure. Block in the arms. And block in the head. I feel like I didn't make the angle of the shoulders extreme enough compared to what I remember from class. The model took a lot of poses where the shoulders were really tilted to one side, and then her head would be straightened. So it's like even the neck is angled out like this, but then the head will just be like, what? I'm just looking at you. Yeah, my body's all twisted, but just looking at you. Another reason why I want a camcorder is because what I'd really like to do is just zoom the camera in on this drawing. But anyway, this class is specifically about drawing figures in clothing and costume and just normal clothes, or sometimes, costumes that kind of give us a sense of character. And that underlying stick figure that I just drew, those stick figures have been really wonky lately. And that is very challenging because that is the backbone for me of my figurative aspect of my drawing. If I'm drawing a figure and I can't get those simple gestures, that simple stick figure to work, then the drawing isn't working. The whole thing is just sort of like, I'm not going to get anywhere if I can't get that working. And I'm going to try later today to go back and watch the replay of the class. But I will tell you that for me, I find the thing that teaches me the most, and I've said this many, many times, you're not hearing anything new. I learn more by trying to go through my mistakes than I do at having a second bite at the apple, meaning having a second chance to do the same pose again from the model. Because more often than not, I mean, it is very possible that I might process the information and all of a sudden figure out what it is that I'm doing wrong. But more often than not, I find that I just make the same mistake or a variation on the same mistake. See, I noticed the neck was in the wrong place. And so I just sort of draw through the first head and move the next head over a little bit. Let's bring this down a little bit more. Let's see here. I already took another stab at this drawing once, which is the one directly below here. I was watching a Proco video earlier in the week, and it was he had Patrick Jones on talking about gestural, combining the structure and the gestural in figure drawing, and it was very soothing to me. And it was one of those things where one of the things he started out with was reminding yourself, look, it's just paper, it's just drawings. Go ahead, do bad drawings. Let the crap come out, work through it, move on, try again. And these are all things that I tell other people, but I still need to hear those things myself sometimes. In fact, a lot of times when I'm telling people that, that's my version of me. If I don't have anyone saying it to me, then I have to do it myself. But it is nice to get it externally for someone to just say, it's okay. Yeah, let the drawing be crap. Try again or try a different drawing. It's not the end of the world. Now, see, this one feels a little bit better than the one that I drew below. Like, this one down here just feels like she's about to pass out. Whereas this feels like someone this one up here feels like someone taking a pose. Oh, reaching for more coffee. Slide this up. To the top part of the page here. There's a little bit of drawing space. Feels like I'm trying to fill the entire page. You know what? I'm going to go back and also, this might seem very weird to you, but the fact that I will literally have a drawing, like the drawing that is here is me redrawing the one that was below it, which was me drawing a drawing that's over here on the other page. But this is also a tool that I use in terms of working through problems. I will literally go and just take the same drawing and I'll try the variations. I'll try to fix one aspect and be like, well, that's still wrong. And this is still wrong. And it's almost like I'm running experiments, trying to figure out where the actual problem is. I'm trying to diagnose the drawing. So for me, sitting here and saying, okay, I could draw another drawing that's on the next page, or I can go to this drawing and redraw this, because I still feel like this drawing isn't quite there structurally or gesturally. In fact, I think that part of the problem is that I can't diagnose what exactly it is that's not right, but there is something not right with it. It has some structure, but it doesn't feel like it is fluid, and it has some gesture, but it also feels stiff. And I think that's actually, if I had to diagnose this, it's an in-between drawing. It has a little bit of the things that it needs, but not enough. Some structure, but not enough. Some gesture, but not enough. You know, and I will say it could be something as simple as the fact that when I was drawing last night, I was pretty tired and I went to bed earlier than usually on the weekends, I'll stay up and try and get as much art done as possible. But notice that little S curve in the center line. Center line starting on this side, coming up, then turning as the torso twists. Normally you want this line to be super light so that as you finish the drawing, that line becomes invisible. You don't even necessarily have to erase it, but that center line is in this, that center line is in this one, that center line is in every single drawing. You want it to be near invisible, but you want to use that center line to help you guide the twists and turns of the torso. I mean, hell, if you can visualize and conceptualize that line without actually putting a line there, meaning if you could just draw like, here's a torso, here's a pelvis, here's where they connect. And if you can do that without actually drawing the physical line, that's even better. If you can do that with just your imagination, all the better. But I find that drawing that line super light helps me define what the figure is doing. It's also interesting how I tend to go back and forth, because sometimes I'll be drawing that gestural line. Well, not the center line, but I'll be drawing lines for the, like for instance, if you look at this hip, you can see that there's a thin line going down the middle. But sometimes when I draw the line, that stick figure phase, instead of drawing a line going down the center, this leg at the same pose doesn't have it. For instance, the bent leg has a soft tone representing that line, which is what I try to do. However, this leg, the line that I put is pretty much at the far outside of the corner of the hip. So that line really is more representing sort of the silhouette, as opposed to, I don't want to call it the skeleton of the bones, but that when you have a line going down the center, it's more like it's the center axis of that form. Like if you were to have an invisible line running down the center of this pencil, no matter which direction I pointed the pencil, that would still be the axis. Because the axis it's not a one-to-one to the skeleton. Because within the leg, the bones, for instance, the hip bone starts almost at the surface of the outside, and as it comes down towards the knee, it cuts inward. So it's cutting kind of diagonally across the mass like this. If I lay this on here, the bone inside cuts across, whereas the axis runs straight down the center. And it's interesting and I think useful to understand those differences because there are times when I intentionally am drawing the bone as opposed to the axis, or vice versa. Both can be very useful in working out the structure of a drawing, depending on when you need it. And also, it's very true that a lot of times I will be drawing and I'll use one or the other, and it's not a conscious decision. And that's why knowing the difference is important, because I may realize that I have chosen one and the one I've chosen is not helping me. And I'm like, oh, wait, I'm building this around the skeleton and I need to focus on the axis, or I'm focusing on the axis and I really need to understand where the bones are touching the surface in this particular part of the body. Let's see here. James is in the chat. James says, good stuff. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And it's interesting. Not like I'm fishing for compliments, but it's nice to hear people say good stuff when the whole point of this is me going over drawings that I don't think are working and then trying to fix them. So that might be, that might just be the curse of my perfectionism coming through. I guess if you have to choose between being cursed with perfectionism or not giving a damn about anything, I would probably, I have chosen perfectionism, but I don't know. Have I chosen perfectionism, or is it just me accepting that that's my personality? I may not have chosen it. It may just be that I'm a perfectionist. There is a deference. I don't know. Let's see here. Yeah, this definitely feels like, compared to the drawing right next to it, it just feels, and part of that may just be all of the extra darkening lines, but I feel like the figure has more rhythm to it. But I will say the downside is that, being that this is very, it's a few days since I actually drew from the model, my memory of the types and positions of the folds, the places where it's bending, where I'm getting these little creases here, this is coming more from my mind and my memory. My concept, it's coming more from my concept of construction than it is from, oh, I actually remember where this fold was. So opposite of memory. This is me just deciding to put things in versus remembering what was really there. And to a certain degree, that is something that I want to train myself to do more of, because deciding to draw something a certain way versus just copying what the model's doing, I think is an important skill that's really hard to learn, because so much of our art education is built on observing and trying to duplicate. And I don't think enough emphasis is put on, it's not about making shit up. It's about understanding what isn't working, even if it's what the model's really doing, and saying, okay, this doesn't make a good drawing. How do I fix that? And I think most artists, usually if you've got any level of humility, you're not going around saying, well, I'm going to make something better than reality. But the truth is many times what you look at right in front of you when you're drawing for the model doesn't work. In real life, there's constantly tangents, but you don't notice it because our brain fills in the details. When you're living in a three-dimensional world, you're experiencing life. You don't mind tangents in real life. You just look at stuff. Every once in a while, you'll look at something like, what is that? And you actually get some visual confusion. You may not realize that you're just looking at a tangent in real life, and that's why it looks weird. You just will look at it for a second, and then the thing will move, or you'll tilt your head, or you'll shift, or see something for a different angle. You're like, oh, that's what that is. But you're not thinking with your art brain. You're not actually thinking, oh, I'm seeing a tangent in real life, and that's making things confusing. But when you're drawing on paper, when you are making the thing, when you're creating it, hell yeah, those tangents jump out. And hell yeah, you're like, this is a problem. I need to fix it. So reality, drawing reality unto itself, it's got a whole host of problems that we don't think about. Or at least we don't think about it as much as we should. Let's see here. Some comments in the chat. So James says, I've mainly been messing with abstract styles more. I've been taking inspiration from David Lynch's early movies in addition to looking at abstract art. I've been trying to figure out if I want to have elements linked together and how to utilize space. Looking at more examples would help with that. Plus, I wouldn't feel like I'm aimlessly drawing. Well, aimlessly drawing is not necessarily a bad thing. There is something about just sort of the searching, expressive, just there's something about wandering in the desert that is beautiful and poetic, and doing it just for the sake of whatever it is that we're making, or just for the experience of making. He also says, do you think that having organic and inorganic shapes next to each other would work for creating contrast, or that would look odd? I absolutely think that creating organic and inorganic shapes would work for creating contrast. I mean, I am in favor of contrast in all its forms, because you can have curvy forms next to straight forms. You can have light forms next to dark forms. Small forms next to big forms. Whether it's organic and inorganic, contrast is simply just having two things that are counter to each other. And I think that contrast is one of the most powerful tools that a creative person has in their arsenal, whether they're a sculptor, animator, drawing, painting, digital, traditional, it doesn't matter. Contrast is one of the most powerful tools we have to create a composition, to direct the viewer's eye, to express feelings and concepts. So yes, I absolutely am a big fan of doing that. I'm trying to think in terms of early David Lynch. I've seen Eraserhead once, and I thought it was interesting. I wasn't necessarily dying to see it again. I've seen Blue Velvet only once, but Blue Velvet I really enjoyed, and I just haven't made time to go back to. And then there's Dune, which most people universally hate, and even David Lynch says was not that he said not that he regrets making it, but that he probably wasn't the right person to make that movie. But David Lynch's Dune is still one of my favorite movies. I'm not saying that it is a great movie or that it's even one of David Lynch's best movies. It's just something that I enjoy. And it's interesting because I think that the Denis Villeneuve version is also beautiful and also amazing in very different ways. Dune is one of those stories, like, I feel like it's one of the early science fiction fables. And what I mean by fable is that, like Little Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel and Frozen, Dune, I feel, is a story that you could have every 20 years or every generation, like not even every 20 years, but feel like Dune is one of those movies that like every 10 years it should get remade. And people should just keep making different versions of it. Like Dracula. That's the thing. Like Dracula and Mary Shelley. I feel like Dune, which, by the way, Mary Shelley, from what I have read, Frankenstein is considered the first science fiction novel. But Dune feels to me like the type of science fiction novel that should continue to be remade. It feels like it's a timeless, epic story. And people should just, instead of getting mad every time someone reboots it, or, oh, I can't believe they cast this person, or they hired this director or this screenwriter, Dune just feels like something that people should keep adding their visions to and creating different versions of them in different aspects. And I've only read 3 of the Dune novels. I haven't read any of the later ones or the ones that were written by his son. But out of the very first novel, I don't feel like you really need to explore the rest of the mythology. I just feel like you just keep retelling that story. It's a beautiful story. Let's see here. Byron says freedom of stylization versus pure accuracy is always a rough battle. Yeah, in that conversation about what you observe versus what you... Now, see, this is the interesting thing. I don't know if it's necessarily stylization per se, and I get where you're going with it, but I'm looking at, while I'm talking, I'm going to be redrawing this pose over here, which is weird that I'm redrawing this one because this is one of the better ones from class, but just working my way through shit. It's not necessarily stylization that I'm thinking of. The word that I would probably use, all right, what word would I use to describe it? It's not about stylization, but what it's about is perhaps composition. But what it is that when you actually are accurate, sometimes accuracy, the accurate thing does not make for a good picture, which is not the same as stylizing, because stylizing is coming in with an intent to mold reality towards the aesthetic of the artist. And my desire is not to mold reality to my aesthetic. Well, I guess it is when I'm saying something is working versus not working. But if you do a drawing and you do everything right and it's still boring, then if people universally of different tastes may look and say, well, yeah, it is what it's supposed to be, but it's not interesting. I don't think that that's stylization. I think that that's looking at drawing and understanding that different aspects that make something compelling. Whether it's gesture, composition, or anatomy. Because there's times when you look at anatomy and you'll look at a model's arm in a pose in a life drawing class, and you look at that pose and you don't question it because you're looking at it in real life. But on a two-dimensional form, if you were to look at it, you'd be like, I can't really tell what this body part is doing. When you're there in a room, you look at it and you can see exactly what it is and it makes sense. But looking at it in a drawing, it is confusing because it has that extra layer of removed from reality. So I'm still searching for the right language to describe it, but it's not stylization. It is taking what is not working in reality or what is not compelling and trying to use our knowledge of picture making to adjust it to be more compelling. Adjust the pose so that maybe the pose reads clearer, or maybe a gesture that looks great in real life, but on paper you're like, this gesture is just needs a little bit more twist to it. Or maybe sometimes the gesture is, I've had models take poses in class and that pose is too radical. It's too much. And I'm like, this looks like, when I draw this on the paper, if I draw it the way it looks like, their neck looks broken and two of their limbs look like the joints are dislocated. And you're like, I need to clean this up to make this work. And by the way, if anyone in the chat thinks of a proper term to describe what I'm describing, that stylization, now that you've heard me talk and ramble for a bit, you can see why I'm shying away from stylization as a term for it. So if anyone thinks of or has some suggestions for a proper way to do a proper term for an idea of adjusting the observed in order to make it compelling or understandable, I mean, editing, really, that's what it is. It's editing. As opposed to stylizing, it's editing. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to call this live stream. Editing. I'm going to call this live stream editing versus stylizing. So let's say you're editing. That's what you're doing. You're editing on paper. That's the closest I can come with. But by all means, I'm still open to hearing other people giving thoughts. But yes, so that is something that, okay, so there was all of that rambling about trying to define what we're talking about. What we're talking about is editing reality. And the reason why I needed all of that buildup is to say that as a student, because I am a lifelong student, I still consider myself a student, but the entire time I've been learning to draw, one of the things I've struggled with is that when you are not a master draftsman, when you're still struggling with your craft and you're still learning anatomy and perspective and gesture, it's hard to know when you are making good choices or bad choices. In other words, it is very difficult to edit when you're not sure of your decisions, or when the decisions that you make on paper, if your initial decisions are wrong, like your first gesture, your sketch that you lay out, if those are wrong, how do you edit towards something right when you're not 100% sure what's right? You're doing more exploration and searching versus clearly saying, this needs to go over here, that needs to be raised, this needs to be turned, this needs to have shadow on this side instead of that side. Those are clear editing decisions of someone who's a master and understands. But it's a very, very difficult challenge to even know what edits to make when you are learning. And that is something that I've gotten better at. In fact, that's kind of the whole point of me redrawing my bad drawings. That's me developing my editorial eye for art. It's me going in and looking at my own drawings and saying, okay, it's fine that this is wrong. What's wrong with it? Because if I can get really, really good at looking at my own drawings and saying what's wrong with it, then it's not that I don't need or don't want teachers, but the most important teacher you can have is yourself. Being able to look at your own work and say, this isn't working, this is why, and these are the 2 or 3 things I need to change to make it work. That is probably the most important skill you can develop as an artist. So hopefully that makes some sense. I mean, that was quite the ramble to get to that, but I think it's important. I think it's supremely important. I think it's one of the things that we forget that we're reaching for. We're trying to learn and figure out. Let's see here. Let me scroll back up. I'm sure you, okay, because I see I've missed a few comments. So I think I'm going to be catching up here to you guys a bit. So James says, I suppose it could be odd in a good way. Let's see here. Oh, asking whether having organic versus inorganic shapes. Yeah, I think that anything can be good or bad. It's just a matter of execution. I think that honestly, if you try to combine organic and inorganic shapes, some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad, but that's more because you're figuring out how to combine them. The act of combining them, there's no value judgment to it. It is neither a positive nor a negative. It's just how well you combine them. And in trying to find good ways to combine them, you're going to find a lot of bad ones. I think that you need to push far enough along and do enough variations on it that you can start to identify positive versions versus negative. And then you can really lean into, all right, now that I know what's a good way of combining these, let me try and experiment so I can create as many good variations as possible. Let me see if I can find a way. Once you know, like, this is how to combine inorganic and organic shapes, and you like have a solid, this is what works, then you can start saying, let me try and break this. Let me try and take something that absolutely did not work and see if I can take what I understand about what does work and take something that didn't work and tweak it. And that's kind of what I'm doing with bad figure drawings. It's me going through and saying, this didn't work. Let me see if I can figure out how to make it work with what I know about other aspects of drawing. Let's see here. Byron says, many people, I feel, don't realize we're basically making optical illusions. In order to pass off reality of the thing, we have to do things in 2D space that isn't necessarily what reality is. Yeah, I mean, that's on a lot of times I kind of have to mentally tell myself when I'm drawing to draw into the paper, meaning like I have this weird mental thing when I'm doing like a detailed shading thing. I try to tell myself that adding a tone is the same as me digging a hole into a surface. So like, let's say that I'm drawing, I don't know, let's say a curving box. Could be a torso, could be a limb, whatever. And I will tell myself mentally, all right, if I wanted to have a hole in the center of that, yeah, it's kind of like just shading. But I kind of mentally tell myself that what I'm doing is imagine that this is a physical object and I'm like just pushing into the surface of that physical object. And that's kind of what I'm doing. If I were to put one down here at the bottom. Well, actually here, let's just say that I add tone along the edge. What I'm doing is I'm pushing the edge of this surface. Like now it looks like it's curving away, almost like this surface went from being straight to slightly rounded. If I erase this straight line that I've got up here, but what that tone is symbolizing is that as opposed to the whole surface being flat, now that far edge is being pushed even farther away from me, which is still that thing of like reaching into the reality of the paper and pushing it. And it's kind of like I have to tell myself these mental tricks to try and understand what the thing is that I'm trying to convey here. See, I see Chris is in the chat. Chris says, hey, Jeremy. Hey, Chris, how you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Working my way through the comments here. Let's see here. So James says, I didn't mind Dune. His short films, such as The Alphabet and Six Men Getting Sick, have an abstract quality to them. I've never really looked at his short films, and I think that would be something. If I can find him on YouTube, or I know that he keeps I think he has a bunch of his short films on his actual website. I should probably go there and check them out. I haven't made time for that. I mean, there's lots of stuff of his that I haven't seen. Like, I want to go back and see the one where it's got the guy driving across country in a lawnmower. That one's supposed to be really great and kind of probably like his most sweetest and sentimental film. It's one of those things where I like David Lynch. I just haven't gone through and watched a bunch of his stuff. I've only seen bits and pieces of Twin Peaks, and I've heard varying degrees of review for the revival or Twin Peaks: The Return. I tried to get my wife to watch Twin Peaks, the original series, and she just wasn't having it. So I was just like, I'll have to find time to watch it on my own. Let's see here. Byron says, yeah, I definitely agree. That's why I tell people that picking good reference is a skill in itself. Not all good things make for a good drawing. That is very, very true. And it's just having to turn a bad piece of reference into a good drawing is just adding extra work for yourself. By the way, I completely erased the drawing that I had because I just did not like what was going on with the figure. This is one of those poses. If I move it over here, this pose, well, here, I can turn this way. This pose just has like a nice subtlety to it. This one, in terms of the twist of the upper body and the lower body. And I realized as I was drawing and talking, this is one of those where, it's all those time people say, well, I don't want to live stream because I can't talk and draw at the same time. For the most part, talking and drawing at the same time hasn't been a problem for me. But this is one of those, when it comes to subtleties, I'll be trying to draw and I'll just realize I am butchering this. I can't do this at all. And I think that's one of those where this pose has a fair amount of subtlety to it that I'm just not capturing. So some of these are going to be really wonky, and it's going to be me trying to fix stuff and making them worse. Which, hey, you know what? Part of the creative process. So let's see here. James says, yeah, not making for a good picture. You can have a video game level that is based on real life location, but doesn't have any liberties taken. It says, perhaps adding variations or interpreting things your own way. Yes, very much. And I think that was the reason why when Byron first did Stylization, why it's not that I bristled at it, but I was definitely trying to, I guess, emphasize that it's less about, I mean, to a certain degree, it is personal aesthetic, but like I said before, it's more about me saying, because here's the thing, if you do there's definitely photorealistic artists out there that do amazing work. And it isn't my cup of tea in terms of what I want to make, but I have a high level of respect for how difficult photorealism is. But, well, even with photorealistic artists, at a certain point, they've got to change and move stuff around to make things fit the aesthetic they're trying to create. And for me, it's less about trying to express a specific aesthetic and more about clarifying things. I'm repeating myself, just saying clarifying things that when you look at reality, they don't seem to work. Yeah, I've made my point. I don't need to keep belaboring it. I'm sorry. But what I really want to do, I will tell you that I've never really thought of that process as editing. And now that in this conversation with you guys, that I have that just as a framework, I'm editing reality, not stylizing it. Now that I have those words to express what I'm trying to accomplish, I think that this is something that going forward, I am going to probably be able to dig deeper in, and I'll be able to probably expand the conversation a little bit more now that I realize that what I'm doing is editing, maybe editorializing a bit, but editing reality versus copying it. That's what I'm trying to do. Because most people think of editing as removing things, but a good film editor will look at a scene and say, we need a pickup shot here because you can't understand what that person is reaching and picking up in a scene before they walk out of the room. And the thing that they're picking up is important. We're going to need to see that in not just this shot, but it's going to play in other parts of the story. We need to see that close-up, that inset shot. Or we need an exterior shot before the character walks into the room so we understand what location they've moved to. Otherwise, you may just be confused and think they're still in the building they were in the last scene. So those are ways in which editing is additive versus subtractive. And we do the same thing. See, and this is interesting because this all ties into David Lynch, or maybe not David Lynch specifically, but it ties into filmmaking and it ties into abstraction versus representationalism. I don't know if that's probably not the right term. Representation versus abstraction. And which one conveys whatever meaning is the artist or creator's intent. Let's see here. James says, yes, aesthetic. I've come across too many comic book artists that have a photorealistic style, but I like John Bolton stuff. Oh, he says, I haven't come across too many comic artists that have a photorealistic style. You know what? It's funny. I haven't seen any John Bolton work in ages. In fact, the last thing of his I can remember is, and this was probably like 15 years ago. I'm sure he's done work since then. But he did a Man-Bat 3-part miniseries for DC, following that Kurt Langstrom, and kind of making him his own sort of anti-hero. And it's interesting because Man-Bat is one of the characters from the Bat family that I actually would really like to, like, if I were going to work on Batman, I don't know what story I'd like to tell, but I like horror stories. And Man-Bat is obviously, he is not a vampire, but he is a giant bat. And much in the way that Batman is a giant bat, he is this weird creature of the night. I think that he's super interesting, and he's a character that I think I'd like to work on. I think he's a character that, with my kind of loose, rough style, would probably lend itself to. And it's funny because John Bolton, he's somebody who is photorealistic, but his style, I think, would lend itself. His style and that Man-Bat thing lends itself to horror noir. Like when you look at old noir films and the black and white photography, that's really stylized with contrasty light, and like you got the you've got sort of the wow, all these names of actors and filmmakers are just passing through my mind and just disappearing. Anyway, I was going to try and rattle off a couple of pulp film actors. Charles Laughton, Robert Mitchum, Marlene Dietrich. That's who I was trying to think of in my head. And when I started thinking about Marlene Dietrich and the minute I started thinking of her, my brain went wonky. and went down a rabbit hole. Point being is that that's what I think of when I think of John Bolton's work. And he does, you know, I mean, I can remember reading science fiction books that he's done over the years, horror books that he's done. In fact, I'm going to write down his name because I want to go and look up what he's done like in the past few years. I haven't seen his stuff in a while. I think I remember seeing him do a historical fiction piece, like a comic, something around the Crusades. So see, this is what's interesting is I needed to draw all of this to really understand what the body is doing. Now, the problem is drawing all of that, but drawing it light enough that I can lay a long flowing skirt over it. And it could just be as simple as, oh, I draw all this and then just come in with the eraser and not erase completely, but just bring it down enough that I can come over it. And I think I may have made her hips a little too wide. Bring those hips in a little bit, just so, because the skirt really does kind of like shoot like almost straight down from her hips. And also, because I'm drawing over erased lines, it's already kind of muddy, I'm making these initial lines too dark. I really shouldn't. What I should be doing is coming in the same way I built up everything, come in here and build this up light. I should be building this skirt up lightly and then slowly darkening in as needed. And I'm just realizing that that's sort of a drafting mistake that I'm making in progress and catching myself and saying, hey, wait, don't do that. Doesn't mean I can't come in here and towards the bottom add in some hard, solid lines. But it will work better for the drawing if I do it softer. And then I can kind of try to build up the fabric kind of bending so that the knee, that's what's interesting here, is this knee comes out. And having to express both that knee coming out and then the fabric that's draping from it being pushed forward more. Maybe having the standing leg pushed back. Let's see here. All right. And just so you guys know, we are at about 58 minutes here. So I'm going to just see if I can touch up or bring this drawing in for a landing. And then we're going to wrap up the stream. So if anybody has any final questions or thoughts they want to share, now is the time. Just thought I'd give you guys the heads up that we're getting into the final countdown here. You know, I've also wondered, this channel has definitely gotten into all of the things that I'm doing in terms of personal study, illustration, and, you know, whatever else I'm spending my time on versus just creating comics. But I have wondered whether I should start a second comic that's more just a stream of consciousness thing, just so that every week when I come on, I'm just working on making comics. And it might not be the main comic that I'm planning to be sort of my magnum opus, but I know a lot of you came here originally for comic book content. So I feel that it is important to share the other things that I'm doing to improve my craft. But I'm curious about you guys, whether you're missing the comic book content, or you're just sort of like, when he gets back to doing comics, he'll get back to doing comics. I guess I'm bringing it up as sort of an informal poll to see where you guys are at. Now, this needs to come across and really feel like it's pushing here. Now, see, this is what's challenging, is trying to get this sense of the knee pushing out. Let's see here. I see Javan in the chat says, what's up? Hey, Jovan, thank you for joining the stream. You know, just hanging out, doing some figure drawing. Let's see here. Byron says, time certainly flies. Yes, it does. Every time I sit down at the drawing table, it feels like it's a time warp. James says, good stream today. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see here. Byron says, that would definitely be cool. At the very least, it could make for an interesting experiment. But overall, I'm fine with anything you do. All art informs my creative process. Besides, I come to these streams for you most of all. Call it a feeling of kinship. Dude, I greatly appreciate that. That is humbling. And that's honestly, that's a big part of the reason why I do it, is because I feel like there's so much that goes into making art, whether it's comics or illustration, besides just the actual comic. And I feel like, you know, sharing the way in which I'm studying and trying to develop and grow as an artist is probably one of the most important things, in that a lot of people will come to art and start making it because they love making art, and then get frustrated because they're not growing as quickly as they'd like, and they don't necessarily see the constant study. And I don't think of it as a struggle. I actually enjoy the studying, but they don't see the constant study and the need to keep improving one's craft. That I think a lot of creators, some people just make what they make and they're not necessarily studying. They've been studying. Some people studied enough in their life that they've absorbed all of the art lessons, and they're draftspeople, they're draftsmen, and they just go out and they make art. But I think that there's a lot of creators that are in the position that I'm in, where the studying never ends, and I'm constantly trying to maintain and hold on to the skill and the craft that I currently have, while developing more skills, while trying to grow my art further. And I feel like showing a lot of that is, like you said, it's something to get about kinship, showing that constant work of improving, trying to grow, trying to expand one's skill set, just trying to hold on to what you already have. Seeing other people with those struggles, or sharing mine, I feel like that's something that the hard work of the feet kicking under the surface to keep propelling us forward is something that doesn't get talked about as much. And so I like sharing it. And the fact that, you know, Byron, you said that you feel a kinship to that. That to me, I think, is probably the most important thing that I'm sharing. So you hit me right in the feels, bro. I mean it. I appreciate that. All right. On that note, back to my big old mug. Okay. I should probably move this out of the way because otherwise I know I'm going to hit it while finishing things up here. By the way, hit that like button, hit that share button. If you know other people that you think would dig these live streams, fellow art journeyers, please, by all means, share it with them. I appreciate that. Helps the channel grow, helps me get the word out. Hell, helps me sell more books, more art prints. Oh. So, if you'd like to get bonus live streams, 2 live streams a month we do. We call it Art Book Study Group, where we do deep dives to some of the best art books around. We've been doing a long-running series on Walt Reed's The Figure, where we just go page by page, and we do studies the same way I'm studying off of my own work. We do studies of art educational books and try to break down those lessons, try to learn, suck out all the knowledge we can. You can get access to hundreds of hours of video already, as well as new live streams twice a month for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. You also get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share artwork, works in progress, art exercises, give each other feedback, encouragement, and just general shop talk about, the art world and this journey we're on. And you get access to a digital archive where you can read my comic books online. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. This is a standalone psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can also pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven told as a Western. It's an 8-issue series broken into 2 volumes. So volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains the conclusion to the series, issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter. They've got character sketches, thumbnails, page layouts, script excerpts, photo reference even. Basically show you how I put the entire comic book together. And if you want to check out what's inside these books before you pick them up, you can head on over to the homepage of my YouTube channel. If you scroll down to book flip-throughs, there are book flip-throughs for all 3 of these books. You can see what's inside them. All right, guys. Again, thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for hanging out, for being fellow art travelers and art journeyers. I appreciate you hanging out. James says, read them all. Thank you. Listen to James. Check him out. Check those books out. Go pick them up. Thank you, everybody. That's it for now. Go be creative.